Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
All right, Pete, Films and Stuff. Welcome back. How are you today?
I'm great, Ethan. How are you?
Everything is good. We are in the thick of the NBA playoffs in real life. I have been watching my Milwaukee Bucks. Last night they lost to the Boston Celtics. The Golden State Warriors wrapped up their series, so that's exciting.
My Sixers got eliminated.
Your Sixers were eliminated by the Heat. So a lot of drama in real life NBA.
Damn you, Pat Riley.
Yeah, and Pat Riley with the Heat. Yeah. Which takes us back to Winning Time on HBO HBO Max. And today we're talking about the last 3 episodes in season 1, episodes 8, 9, and 10, called California Dreaming, Acceptable Loss, and Promised Land. We'll break all 3 of these down and look forward to what we've got, I assume, in season 2, which is coming, right?
Yeah, it just got announced, or it just got renewed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not. Rumors are that there's going to be a time jump involved.
Oh.
So I don't know how far ahead it's going to be, but I don't think it's going to be an immediate pickup, as in like it's going to pick up with the 80-81 season.
Yeah,
I expect that they'll probably go into the late 80s towards the retirement era of Magic Johnson.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's right.
Set up the potential for the Kobe Shaq era by the end of it, which would be interesting.
I hope the Supreme Court is getting comfortable. Looks like a lot of lawsuits coming their way, right?
Exactly. Anyway, so maybe why don't we start with a quick recap? I think you're well versed into the show, maybe even more so than I am. Why don't you tell us and tell our listeners what happened in episodes 8, 9, and 10, and we can talk about the season overall.
8, 9, and 10 summary breakdown is Coach McKinney is out. There was initially a lot of consternation by the Lakers brass in terms of whether or not he should resume his post as a head coach. And it seemed like the owner, Genie Bus, was going to reinstall him. And then when he went to go visit him at his house, McKinney was just kind of out of it and thought that Bus was like a delivery guy. So Bus obviously backtracked. And we see now Paul Westhead and his assistant, Pat Riley, who still has the old fluffy hair, not yet slicked back Italian style. These are going to be the coaches for the remainder of the season. And McKinney is going to be at home listening to this on the radio. Another important point is that Spencer Hayward, who we saw was one of the really close friends of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who also, went directly from high school to the NBA and seemed to have, like a spiritual kinship with Kareem. He is now off the Lakers. He was initially battling a knee injury, and to overcome the knee injury, he turned back to drugs. It seems like it's crack, something serious.
Looked like it.
And the team, with Kareem casting the deciding vote, decides to remove him from the team, which is something I don't think you'd see in the modern NBA where there's contracts and stuff, not just votes. But in any case, he is off. And in kind of a sidebar to the main show, they kind of show Hayward, struggling with not only substance abuse, but also some pretty dark thoughts about revenge and violence and things like that. He does get a visit from Kareem, who seems to put him straight. But that was kind of a darker part of the show. Next, we have Magic, who continues to evolve and have a great rookie season, battling Larry Bird for Rookie of the Year, which he ultimately does not get, with that being awarded to Bird. Magic gets a talk both from Jerry West and Kareem about what it takes to win in terms of sacrifice, in terms of personality, in terms of perspective. And you see Magic, who's usually known for his affable nature, big smile, start to show a little bit more of a killer instinct and is a little bit more focused. And you can see him digging deep especially in the season finale, where he plays the game at a different position, center, and really pulls deep to have a great game. And that leads into our next point, which is Lakers win the championship. Not only happy to get to the NBA Finals, they actually win in 6 games in Philadelphia. This mirrors history exactly. They won Game 6 in Philadelphia without Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was battling a sprained ankle or a hurt foot. Magic Johnson starts at center, has a tremendous game with over 40 points, and the Lakers do win the championship, thus securing profit for Genie Bus. He's able to avoid defaulting on his loan, and it seems like the future is bright for the Lakers franchise. And that gets to the next point, which is we see that the mother of Genie Bus passes away. I think this is episode 9. And Bus, after coming to grips with this loss in his life, has to appoint someone else as his financial officer. Genie kind of thinks she's in line for it. And then her father throws her a curveball and says, hey, I want to bring your brothers into the business. Who do you think would be the better one for it? He kind of spends some more time with his sons, sees that they're a little bit immature, not focused on the business, don't have the right perspective to be in such a position. And instead, in a twist I did not see coming, chooses Claire, who has come a long way since episode 1 when we were introduced to her. So that is the wrap up of season 1 of Winning Time. Everything ends on a high note. Lakers win. And now I'm really looking forward to season 2. What about you?
I am as well. I must say that the last couple episodes really, they stuck the landing.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem sappy. It didn't seem over the top. They didn't sugarcoat much. I mean, they really had done a lot of sugarcoating and maybe even the opposite, maybe salt coating, if that's the right word, to a lot of players, right? And to a lot of people.
Yeah.
They really made some people look not great. They really made some people maybe look a little more holier than they actually were. But I think overall, the tone of the show being a dramatized version of fiction wasn't bad.
Who legitimately has a complaint? I mean, whenever there's a biopic, right? I mean, unless it's really a love letter, people are going to have issues with how they're portrayed, right? Who do you think legitimately has a cause of action against HBO for how they were portrayed in this show?
So potentially someone like Westhead.
Really?
Yeah,
Where?
he comes off as a little
not
weak,
just
immature,
not
and naive,
strong,
but incredibly weak, right?
Yeah.
And you've got, when you're supposed to be leading a team of 15
Yeah.
big basketball players who all have their massive egos, it just felt like he would get overrun by them. And it really, if it weren't for the fact that Riley were there, I think he would have gotten steamrolled. Right?
Yeah.
I felt like Riley was really his support and spine. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, even when he was trying to talk to, what's his face? McKinney, right? He ends up peeing himself and ends up in the hospital for a night. It just wasn't a good look. And
No.
And that's fine. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it's what it wasn't. But it was just, he constantly came off as a coward.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, certainly if I'm him, I'm not looking at that show and beaming with pride about how it was done. But there were some subtle things that I think, kind of redeemed him. And one of them was, as you mentioned, I think a few episodes ago, he was generally very well liked. There was earlier in the season, there was kind of the scene where McKinney surprised him and came back, and it kind of showed like how he walked into all these little inside jokes and all these little rituals, and it was a team that was extremely disciplined and maybe even a little bit tight under McKinney. And under Westhead, he had a really good working relationship with Pat Riley. That was a very healthy relationship, right? It seemed that the team gelled. Obviously, they had a very successful season. Everyone generally liked him. Yeah, he was a little bit of a ninny for sure. All he could kind of do was quote Shakespeare, although he came up with a good one kind of towards the end.
Yeah.
So I agree. Like, definitely the guy's not sitting at home beaming while watching this, but in some subtle ways, they generally made him not terrible,
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I think terrible.
I think that way, probably maybe even someone like Spencer Hayward.
Yes.
Hayward gets it a little worse because, he is someone who had a lot of substance abuse problems.
Yeah.
He's been very open about that. He's gone through therapy.
Yeah.
He's gone through rehab. He's done he's worked a lot on himself.
Yeah.
But, after that episode, I think it was episode 9 where he ends the episode by going to like his drug dealer's apartment and saying, I need you to kill these guys. Literally, I want you to kill the Lakers.
Yeah.
Right? And at first you're just like, oh, haha. And then he's like, in that episode 10, he's like, they've got guns under the cushion. Yeah. And you're just like, oh my God, he's talking about actually killing them.
Yeah.
And then I did a little bit of digging after the episode, and I read somewhere that, he was referring to potentially cutting the brakes on Westhead's car or Riley's car. And, cutting the brakes of someone's car is a far cry from hiring a hitman to kill him. Right?
Are brakes actually able to be cut anymore? I feel like this was like Model T Fords and there's just like one brake line. Can you even like cut brakes anymore?
I think back in that era you probably could. I think, brake fluids and things like that. I think because they were all relied on, most cars back then, and even some today relied on hydraulic brakes, not on disc brakes. So, you really required that. Look, I'm not a mechanic. Don't hold me to any of this.
Let's put the disclaimer.
Right?
Films and stuff is not called mechanics and stuff.
Exactly.
We are not qualified mechanics.
But having said that, it's such a common trope, right? Like in other mysteries and things like that. God, my brakes are dead.
It's so Roadrunner. To me, it's like so Roadrunner that you cut the brakes.
I agree. So, but still, it's okay. Let's put it this way: tampering with your car is still a far cry from hiring your drug dealer to kill someone.
I agree.
Right?
I mean, just the idea of cutting brakes seems like so cartoonish that it's hard to kind of like take it. It's not so dark. Whereas when you show like a revolver, with like a bullet in the chamber, that's kind of like, whoa, this just got serious.
And props to the actor because, he really sold it that he was going off the deep end.
Oh, yeah.
He was like super sweaty in all of those scenes. And like you could see that he was having like what looked like a panic attack the whole time, So it did, I mean, not that I know what looks real and doesn't look real when it comes to a drug-induced like fervor, but
it did.
At the same time, it sold it. He sold it. So, kudos to him, I guess. And I thought that was sweet that what I liked in that episode was they had another potential for drama because, in episode 10, we learned that David Stern talks to Magic Johnson before he goes into the locker room.
Oh, yeah.
And says, hey, so we really want to give MVP of the finals to Kareem, but he's not here right now. You are. I think we should give it to you. And that to me blows my mind because for two reasons, right? Like in this era, even if you're injured, most players travel unless
I totally agree with you. Can we just call a timeout for the fact that the Lakers in the 80s, if you were injured, it's like, we're just going to save the airfare.
Stay at home and just watch it. Yeah. And so I didn't get that, but I took it on board. Maybe that was an era thing, but like in today's day and date, like if you sprained your ankle, you were still traveling with your team. Of course. Right? And so I also find it hilarious that the league has decided that Kareem is the MVP, but because he's not there, David Stern, the like the vice president of the Commissioners League, is able to say, hey, by the way, do you want it? I can just give it to you and we can call you the MVP without any repercussions from anybody else.
David Stern
and then they made it seem like he was the one, like Magic Johnson, like stole the MVP from Kareem. But kudos to Kareem for them to not really make a big deal out of it. Kareem, I think, in his wisdom, in his like Godfather-esque figure, he's all about showing that he's the wise guy of the team, right? And I mean, wise guys like the wise old man, the learned man. He's experienced everything. So he probably, and maybe I'm reading into it, but I took it to say that he understood that that's the way the league works, and he didn't hold it against Magic. But like in the earlier part of the of this season, I wouldn't have been surprised if like they used that as another tension point between Kareem and Magic.
Yeah.
Which would have been weird because they had spent 10 episodes basically getting them to be partners and to be working together as friends. And then to all of a sudden introduce this, it would have been really a bit weird. Right, it would have been a little out of place. I'm glad they didn't play that up any way further than that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
let me ask.
Go ahead.
Sorry, let me just ask you. Did you realize, or how did you feel about how the show has kind of shifted in tonality from episode 1 through 10? Did you find there wasn't a shift?
I mean, there is a shift. Although I have to say, this show's really interesting because usually we're very critical of shows that can't decide what they want to be. Are they supposed to be dramas? Are they supposed to be comedies? Are they supposed to be offbeat? Are they supposed to be, and this is a show that even beginning in the first episode, I recall the first scene, Jerry Buss was kind of in bed with a young woman without a top on, and they immediately broke the fourth wall where he was talking into the camera, talking about buying a basketball team. And it wasn't really clear if this was going to be silly or if it was going to be kind of raunchy because of the topless woman, or if it was really going to be true to basketball. And I have to say, even this show, it's always a little bit surprising in terms of how it works. They do like these camera flashbacks. They kind of show sometimes grainy footage. They show a lot of basketball action, which is a little bit unusual for a drama. And to be honest, the action's actually pretty decent. Usually you see in like sports movies or sports shows, the action's not very believable. Here it's actually okay, So I agree with you. The show isn't really what I thought it would be. But I kind of like the way that it's a little bit punchy and kind of incorporates a little bit of everything. And I think it's done a really good job, actually. I'm really, really surprised that it tries to integrate all these elements, and it does it in a pretty good way.
I gotta say, I'm actually quite intrigued by what they did, right? Because I think the first episode, if I remember correctly, I thought the very first scene of the very first episode was Magic at the doctor's office and no one saying a word.
You're right.
And then so it was like a super somber, super serious moment.
Yes.
And then we instantly transitioned to Jerry West lounging at the Playboy Mansion, surrounded by naked women. Correct. Some who are still having sex in the background. Yeah. It was a bit, not weird, but it was a bit of a shock to the system. Yeah. And then you're right, he immediately breaks the fourth wall and starts talking to the camera, like almost from the first scene, right?
Yeah.
I think what's weird is, or maybe not weird, but what's interesting is that, for example, the fourth wall breaks got less and less over the season.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think there were far more in the first half than there were in the second half. I don't even know if there were many, if any, in the last 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And then we also, as you rightly pointed out, were the different film styles where some things were filmed with, like, you could see the film grain and you could see like the film markings to indicate to change the reel.
Yes.
And, you know, in that first episode where you see the Lakers play together for the very first time in Palm Springs in their training camp, they used animation for the first time. Yeah. And then you saw that. But then that stopped almost immediately as well. Yeah. So it was just... I can't help but feel that they were like using these 10 episodes as kind of like, let's find an art style or a film style that looks like it's going to work for us. Yeah. And I don't think they settled on anything by the end of it.
Yeah, right? I agree. I can think of kind of only 3 times they used animation. And I agree, like, none of it was kind of necessary, but it wasn't so overpowering that it really like turned me off. The graininess I kind of like. I mean, I think they did a good job of integrating the graininess to kind of show like, hey, this is like we're showing you something modern in high definition. This is kind of what it would have been like in the 80s if you were watching this on TV, you know, or if this were actually being filmed in the 80s. This is what it would have looked like to you. I thought that was kind of pretty unique, actually.
Yeah.
Doesn't work all the time, but they did it in a good way.
I would say that normally, if this were any other show or if this were a drama that weren't necessarily a biopic or something like that, I think I would have gotten really annoyed.
You're right.
I think it would have been too much of a jarring distraction. I think the only reason they really got away with it is because the topic, at least for me, is far more interesting. Yeah. And far more, you know, something I'd pay more attention to than filmography, which again, I am not, you know, I'm not a guy who sits there and criticizes film camera angles or things like that unless it's blatantly obvious, right? And I think we can think of something like Michael Bay's Ambulance, where he started using drones for his filming. Oh. And the first few times you saw it, it was pretty cool, but then he kept using them and you just kind of get a headache. And again, normally I wouldn't notice these kinds of things, but because it was so jarring, I couldn't help but notice.
If we can go back to that, that's interesting because I felt Michael Bay used those drones unnecessarily. It was just kind of like to transition from scene to scene. And you'd have a drone that would just like dive or circle around something. I think it was unnecessary. And I think that's the point, which is you can have a camera style like you see in Better Call Saul, right? Which is probably for me, like the flagship for how you have a style, but the style is for a purpose. It's not just because you've got a toy and you want to use it. But I guess that's what they're trying to do here in Winning Time is to, you know, kind of remind us that this happened in the 80s. It was a very different, you know, style back then.
Potentially.
I like this show, though. I have to say, I really enjoyed season 1. I mean, if season 2 came out tomorrow, I would dive right away into season 2. But I agree with you. I'm not that interested in seeing the subsequent season. Let's fast forward a little bit. And yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see the season where Magic Johnson is diagnosed with HIV, although that takes Kareem out of the picture, right? Then there's a whole new cast. I mean, if you look at the carryover of the team that year, possibly there's Michael Cooper. All those other guys are gone, right? Pat Riley is there, different hair. Yeah. All those other guys are gone. So, I mean, you've really got to replace the entire cast. So I imagine it's going to be somewhere in the middle, maybe Kareem's last year, and they make him bald or balding as Kareem was. Because that guy was really a remarkable actor to boot him out after 1 year and fast forward so much.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, potentially
Genie Bus will be obviously much more mature.
It's interesting because the Genie Bus that I know is kind of like this, not cutthroat in a bad way, but she is like this kick-ass basketball team owner, operator. She's savvy and, you know, she's high flying. She's in the scene. She's dating Phil Jackson, whatever it is, you know, she seems very present. Whereas the genie in the show has been very demure, has been like, oh, I don't mind sitting in the back seat. Oh, you go off and watch the Lakers win the championship. I'll take care of grandma's things. And I'm not saying she wasn't like that as a person, but it just seems like, I mean, you know, what are you doing? You know, and then she even had Claire bat for her, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. But you're right. I think going back to that, I actually like the fact that they now are showing Claire Rothman taking a more senior position because she really did bust her ass to get things to where they were.
I mean, Genie is a kid in this show, right? So, I mean, it's maybe not that unusual that it's taking her a little bit of time, not just to be like the owner's kid, but to also be, a woman in that workplace. I mean, it's maybe not unusual that it's taking her a little bit of time to kind of find her voice and to find the right level of, when she should assert herself and when not. And maybe Claire is kind of historically, even kind of her mentor or, her role model,
right,
to begin to assert herself a little bit. But I agree. What you see now with her as a kid does not by any stretch indicate that she's going to be, a pretty powerful, owner.
Yeah.
But it does show her brothers, to kind of be douchebags.
Lackadaisical, not really interested. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they did anyone dirty. I don't know anything about the brothers.
They just seemed entitled. I mean, it was clear that they were supposed to be in that one scene. That's the first time we've been introduced to them, and the script rightly made them seem entitled. And we were supposed to have a negative impression, like, oh, these guys are, like rich, spoiled, entitled kids, not very mature. The way that they're taunting people, the way that they're only focused on beer, the way that they're deferred to their father, I think it got the point across pretty quickly.
So we've touched upon a little bit about what we think season 2 is going to do, but, is there anyone in particular or anything in particular you want to see about the Lakers dynasty?
I mean, I'd like to see more of Pat Riley. I mean, I was waiting for his transformation. I mean, and again, historically, I'm not sure exactly how it happened. And I'm really interested to see. So apparently, historically, season 2, Paul Westhead is brought back and he's dismissed somewhere in the middle of season 2.
That's right. Pat Riley takes over as intern and then becomes
it's for
full-time.
Performance. So, I mean, I guess the team kind of struggles the next season. In terms of if you're looking at what's going to happen historically, right? Because this show has tried to create this Boston Lakers rivalry and really the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird rivalry. So we've been introduced to Larry a little bit. If it's going to fast forward more than a year or two, then possibly we are introduced to kind of like a young Michael Jordan. Like Julius Erving would be out. Michael Jordan would be in, possibly like an Isaiah Thomas if we're looking at like those early 80s big stars. Yes. And we see, kind of like the retirement of Kareem. I remember Kareem. I mean, I vaguely remember this, but for me, Kareem was a bald guy or a balding guy. And they had like this 1 year send off for him where like every year, every place he visited, they like gave him like a retirement gift. Like I remember when he came to Milwaukee, they gave him like a Harley Davidson motorcycle and like there was this big presentation. Like I think every team kind of gave him like a going away present and he had kind of like this 1 year swan song, but that was not the year. This would not be the
come back.
I don't think so. I think and
this is totally off the top of my head. I remember the Kareem I remember.
Yeah.
And this is like really when I was just getting into basketball, was not balding. He was bald. He was looking a bit, not heavy, but like he was definitely not as lithe as he is in his rookie year.
Yeah.
And he's, if I remember correctly, he took some time off after his HIV diagnosis. And then he comes back for a season or two.
No,
or
you're thinking of Magic Johnson. You're thinking of Magic Johnson. You're not thinking of Kareem then, right?
Sorry. I am thinking of Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
I apologize. Apologize. You're right.
Yeah.
That's who I was thinking of.
Yeah.
No, so Kareem, I don't remember. Actually, you're right. I don't actually even remember Kareem when I was when I was first getting into
when you and I were growing up, Kareem was like really at his. I mean, he was really on. I don't know what they call it. Like he was really having a swan song. Like
Right.
I don't think he played a lot of minutes anymore. I mean, he was still a good player, but he certainly wasn't like a perennial all-star or dominating anymore.
And it happens, right? 7-footers don't typically last that long in the game.
And I think he played 19 seasons, right? And he came out of college. I mean, it's different now, but I mean, like LeBron James, right, was in the NBA when he was 18, right? So he's 38 now, his 20th year. Kareem, remember, at UCLA, you couldn't play as a freshman and you had to play sophomore, junior, senior. So assuming he came out at 21 or 22, he was 41. Dude, you and I are in our 40s. I mean, he was ancient at the time.
Yes.
We probably looked up to him like 40, like you might as well be like 70, I mean, but
and
it's
definitely
true.
At that position because you get beat up a lot.
I mean, he was
already,
twice as old as Michael Jordan, right? So I mean, when he was a rookie, I mean, he was ancient by professional basketball standards. So I mean, we remember him when he was not at all dominant. He was just kind of this grandfatherly figure that everyone respected because of what he was, when he first came into the league in like 1972 or whenever it was. So
here's something interesting.
I'm ready.
If we're going to start talking about the Magic Johnson Bird rivalry era and maybe transition into how they became friends. Yeah. Right? I think what's going to be interesting is we're also probably going to see a rookie Michael Jordan in one of these episodes.
Probably.
Right? We're going to see the dominance of the Bulls, even though they're not able to win the championship. And that's primarily because of, what was that team? Detroit, the Pistons. Yeah. Right? We're probably going to see Isaiah Thomas in here.
Yes.
And what was it? Was it the Fab Five?
That's basketball. I mean, you'll see like the Atlanta Hawks. You'll see the Rockets.
We'll definitely see Dominic Wilkins. Well, we'll see all of these guys, right?
Yeah. So I assume that probably David Stern is going to have a bigger role as well, right? Like we've been.
Yeah, I don't even remember when he became commissioner full.
I don't either, because I mean, back then it was just a commissioner. Like no one really paid attention. But I would expect that probably in the season or two after this, that he became the commissioner, and that's really when the NBA kind of like got its messaging on point. Yeah, there's so many like kind of anecdotes
TV
about
rights in there. Yeah. They got That's when it started becoming like a superstar sporting event. Yeah, I think the Lakers were probably primed themselves perfectly for that. Right?
Yeah, but I have to say, I mean, you take these things for granted, right? I mean, we take it for granted now that Los Angeles is a Lakers city, right? And for years it was the Lakers are so amazing and the Clippers are so pathetic. But I mean, again, I think if anything, what this does is it kind of shows you that these things weren't always, for granted. That there was a time, right? Even Jerry West referred to Donald Sterling, right? The disgraced Donald Sterling, and said, hey, he always wants a team, but he's too cheap to buy his own. Now we know, of course, that he bought the Clippers at some point. But there's really no reason that, for example, Jerry Bus could have bought the Clippers, right? I think they're the San Diego Clippers at the time. Yes. And he could have moved them to Los Angeles. Maybe they didn't have the first pick that they could have picked Magic Johnson, but maybe things would have been totally different, right? They could have traded for Magic Johnson. They could have traded for Kareem. Something could have happened, right? I mean, history wasn't necessarily written in stone. There's an alternate universe if we're looking at, like the Marvel multiverse, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, and this show certainly wouldn't have shied away from that.
Yeah. There's an alternate world where the Lakers are just this former Minnesota basketball team in ugly purple and yellow uniforms, which doesn't strike you as a great color right away, right? And the Clippers, in red, white, and blue are America's team, and they're the team that everyone's loving in Los Angeles. There's an alternate world out there that's the case. So, I mean, I think Bus deserves a lot of credit, or at least this show gives him a lot of credit for turning things around. It definitely doesn't depict him as always a great father. Certainly nothing indicates that he's a good husband, but, he's got a vision and he's got a belief and, he has inspired people around him. to make something that very few people other than him believed in.
Yeah.
There's a good moral to that story.
I know we've been batting around our scores and reviews every episode, and I thought by the end of the season I would say that this is a must subscribe to HBO Max.
But I feel a but coming.
No, I'm not. Right now I'm between a mooch someone's password and a must subscribe. I would say that on average, if you're a basketball fan, this is definitely a must subscribe.
Yeah.
I think this really gives you an insight. However skewed it is, it gives you a reasonable insight on the NBA in the 80s.
Yep.
Again, this is going back to when we first started reviewing the 355. I think I'm going to try, whenever I'm in between two, I will always round up.
All right.
So I think that this is a must subscribe to HBO for.
I say the same. And I say it because I think there's three elements in here that are key. I think it's entertaining. I mean, I really enjoyed every episode. I think it's culturally significant. I mean, you don't have to be American. You don't even have to be a basketball fan, but you've heard of Magic Johnson. You've heard of the Lakers. There's some utility in knowing the background. And I think third, there's some inspiration in this, whether it's intentional or not. You see how someone has bought a business that was potentially failing and they believed in it. They had a vision. They empowered and motivated the people around them. And I think it's a very, very good story about how that happened. Not so dissimilar to a lot of other successful companies, but I think that that deserves something.
I agree.
Now,
that sounds great.
On the Jerry West side, which I think is something that I haven't heard about in a while. And you and I had debate club about this some time ago, where I think that we agreed that I unanimously won that debate in the sense that Jerry West should be thanking the writers from HBO. Instead of suing them, he should be going out of his way and he should be tipping them. Because I can sincerely say, I don't think Jerry West was portrayed that negatively. He was a little bit manic. He was a little bit bonkers, but overall, I have a more positive impression of him as a guy who, he gave a crap and he cared and he tried, right? Yeah, he probably...
Certainly by episode 10.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember because he has that scene where they kind of talk about his future and he even admits, I might be cut out for the front office gig, not for the... for the on-court gig. And, they have that back and forth where he's kind of super stressed out, in the tunnels of the arena while the game is going on. And then finally they're like, we won the championship. Relax today. Yeah. On Monday, we start with the next season.
I think that he really owes a debt of gratitude to the show. As a guy, I can honestly say I wouldn't be able to say diddly poo about him prior to the show, apart from the fact that he was Jerry West. He grew up in West Virginia and he was on the Lakers. And then he was some executives at a few different places around the NBA. I really didn't know anything about the guy. He was just this old white-haired grandfather. And again, he was a little bit nuts. But to be honest, almost anyone who's been successful in sports or in a senior management position needs to be a little bit cuckoo from time to time. I didn't find that he did anything that I would think justifies going to the Supreme Court. However, for sheer entertainment value, I hope it goes to the Supreme Court, and then I hope HBO does a show about it going to the Supreme Court, and then
maybe it's winning time.
Setting off a cycle. Then he goes to the Supreme Court again about how he was portrayed going to the Supreme Court against Winning Time. And I just want to see this as a perpetual cycle.
That's hilarious. Winning Time season 35.
Supreme
Jerry
Court,
West goes after.
Supreme Court.
He goes to the appellate structure.
Is there really anything better about just this endless game of tit for tat? They're like, oh yeah, you want to go to the Supreme Court? We'll do an episode about it. And then he writes a season.
It goes from being a sports biopic to like a legal drama biopic.
And then he writes a cease and desist. Do not make an episode about me going to the Supreme Court. and then they make another episode about his cease and desist letter, right? It's like the old Conan. Do you remember Conan O'Brien? Conan O'Brien got, I don't know any of the facts, right? So I'm going to get this totally wrong. He got like a lawsuit or a cease and desist letter from someone or some company that was upset with what he said on the air. They had like the sock puppet. I don't know if you remember the sock puppet. He had like the sarcastic sock puppet.
Yeah, the dog, right?
The
Triumph
dog,
the Insult
right?
Dog.
And then
Triumph the Insult Dog. I remember.
The dog actually like held the complaint in its mouth and started talking about it. Because I think the dog's line was always like, "I poop on you" or something, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then he had exactly the complaint and he started reading it and he's like, "I poop on you." It's like the ultimate middle finger towards the complaint.
I love it. I love it. That is a very Conan O'Brien thing to do.
That was the old Conan, who didn't give a rip, who was so edgy. And then they hired him on the Tonight Show. And just like everyone, once you get hired on the Tonight Show, you
got to fit into these corners. You got to
give away your personality, right? Stephen Colbert, who used to be the funniest man in the world, and now
and he's become like this dry cracker on the Late Show.
He didn't sell his soul. He sold his personality, right? He's nothing. He's not even like remotely funny or entertaining. No opinion. It's from the guy who was on Comedy Central, who was so funny and interesting.
My favorite used to be when Colbert would go against Conan and against Stewart, and they had like these mock battles and debate. It was wonderful. It was really funny. Yeah. It was really funny. You're right. They kind of beat that out of you.
So Conan was so edgy and interesting, and then he went on the Tonight Show. But then when he left and he started doing like his own stuff,
TBS.
Yeah, he was super funny.
Yeah,
he had that crazy intern. Like he was very funny again. They gave him like more freedom and more stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is...
we digress.
We digress. Yes. That is Winning Time, end of season 1. It's a wrap. It's in the books. Pete and I...
It's a must subscribe.
It is a must subscribe. Don't delay. Go get HBO Max. Watch it. There's a lot of other stuff, great stuff on HBO Max, by the way. We need to do an episode on it. I am obsessed with...
We need to talk about Tokyo
Vice. I'm obsessed, right?
I started it. And then I couldn't stop. Yeah. And when it ended, I was just like, where is more? Yeah. This is not over. How can you do this to me?
I totally agree. Yeah. It is exceptional. The only problem with shows that are not, let's not say we don't have to be English centric. Whenever there's a show that has subtitles, it limits how you watch it because you actually have to watch it. You can't just listen, And I watch a lot of my shows, like, I don't know, like second screening, right? Like I'm listening to it, I'm paying attention, but I'm not glued to the screen. And when you've got subtitles, you really don't have a lot of room for anything else. You have to be. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting you say that because I think there are a couple of the shows that we're watching right now, I would say, or that we've just finished that we're going to do reviews on, are shows that you kind of have to stop everything else you're doing and watch 100% focused on.
That's true.
In any case, we'll get back to you on these HBO. There's a lot of shows on Apple TV, on HBO that we're watching that we're really enjoying. And we will give you reviews on that as well.
Pete, what do we have on our next episode?
With Doctor Strange 2, we officially kicked off the summer box office season. And so...
Where's our music?
What?
Where's our special effect?
We can't license anything. We can't afford to license anything. Ethan and I thought that it would be really interesting if we went through the summer box office summer movies that are coming out and ranked them in what we thought was going to be the 1st to 10th in terms of highest grossing pick. Now, technically speaking, we should have done this a little, maybe a week or two earlier because Doctor Strange 2 really kicked it off, but that's okay.
That's okay.
We're fine. We're still in there.
We're fine.
We're
all fine.
We're looking from May 1 when
May
the
Day.
Summer season starts and ends around the end of August.
I think it should be May the 4th. I think we should make summer season start May the 4th.
Fine by me.
Done.
Because that is also when
Executive
Doctor
decision.
Strange 2 launched anyway. Oh. So, we will get back to you. I think that's going to be probably our next episode or in our next 2 episodes when we're talking about our predictions for this summer and what movie we think is going to take it all.
So actually this is a competitive event, right?
Indeed. We'll get back and then we'll grade ourselves at the end of summer to see how well we do.
I love examinations, not really. Okay. Everyone, thank you for joining. Pete, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ethan. Thank you, everybody else.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.